This Future Cities Africa episode is presented by Wesgro, the official tourism, trade and investment promotion agency for Cape Town and the Western Cape. Karen Bosman, Strategic Advisor, Office of the CEO at Wesgro, is my guest today. We discuss harnessing the benefits of foreign direct investment, or FDI, exports and tourism. Karen, welcome.
Dan, thank you very much for having me and for having us on your show.
We're going to be doing a series of episodes with Wesgro. In this episode, you'll be speaking to the context of what Wesgro does and why it is important.
I'm just the scene setter for the rest of the series. Wesgro will be doing a few episodes, and I'm just going to touch on some of Wesgro's core functions and provide some context as to why these are or can be key enablers in an economy. So, for those who don't know, Wesgro is the tourism, trade, and investment promotion agency for Cape Town and the Western Cape. The agency itself was established almost 40 years ago as a public-private partnership, which was mainly driven by business, so by the private sector. But over time, it has changed, and today it is a provincial public entity, which is enacted through and mandated through legislation at a provincial level. It's the only subnational trade and investment promotion agency in South Africa, which spans two levels of government. So we are mandated through legislation to play a role on a local and a provincial level. Wesgro's focus includes investment promotion, export promotion, tourism promotion, and film and media promotion.
Thanks, Karen. Can you tell us a little more about Wesgro's different functions?
The investment promotion team works on the one hand to bring investment into the Western Cape, foreign investment, but also local investment and local expansion. And on the other hand, works on business retention. So keeping businesses in the Western Cape, and a large part of this is also linking those businesses to the local economy and really bringing the investment into this sphere of the local economy. The export promotion team will help Western Cape companies to export their products into global markets. They do this through linking exporters to international buyers, through trade shows, or through connections abroad. We have a network of connections in international markets that we work through. Then another part of the team does export development. So we do an export advancement program where anybody who wants to start exporting can join the program and learn the basics. And there's also an aspect of marketing. So on the investment side and on the export side, you on the investment side, you marketing the value proposition of why to invest in the Western Cape. And on the export side, you are marketing the Western Cape as we call it, a sought after source market. So if you are in an export market and you buy a product from the Western Cape, you want to have that connection with the fact that you are buying a quality product and a reliable product or service. And then tourism, we do tourism destination marketing. This team creates awareness of the Western Cape as a tourism destination in foreign markets, and also promotes activities, promotes the tourism offering in order to drive demand and to increase tourism numbers. We have a film and media team who work to attract international and local productions into the Western Cape. We also have a few special projects. One of these is the Cape Town Air Access Project, which is a collaboration between the Western Cape government, the City of Cape Town Tourism, Wesgro, South African Tourism, the Airports Company of South Africa, as well as a number of private sector players. And this is a project which is housed in Wesgro to bring direct flights to the Western Cape.
And what role does an agency like Wesgro play to achieve these functions?
In order to achieve these functions, Wesgro plays a critical role as a convener, as a facilitator, and as a matchmaker. And this is really where a lot of the impact lies, because this is where you're able to lock in the benefits of investment into the local economy and into the local knowledge systems, and where you can ensure that every cent spent by a tourist is really circulated through the local economy rather than lost again. And that's really where the benefit lies of an agency like this, which is so embedded in the local economy.
You've explained what Wesgro does. Let's zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger context and how an agency like Wesgro supports economic growth. Could you paint that picture for me?
For this episode, I'm going to focus on the international aspects of what Wesgro does. We will touch on everything throughout the series, but I want to just bring in the international part. The question really is, why do we want to attract foreign investment and visitors, and why do we want to sell our goods in foreign markets? Let me start with exports, and I'm going to use a simple example, but hopefully it paints the picture. So if you are a business in a local economy and you are dependent on that economy, so let's say a national economy, you are going to sell your goods to the people in that country. So any economic situation, any, let's say, economic downturn, we all know what those are. Any economic downturn, the consumption of the people in that country is going to get less. Your market size depends on the size of the country. It depends on the spending power of the people in the country. But if you export, then you can de-risk that to an extent. So you can export to a market which has a completely different economic context, where people perhaps have much higher spending power, and different markets. So different times, different markets have different situations, and so the more you in, less risky it is overall. So a very simple example, and it's a bit of an extreme example, but it happened, and that was the ban on alcohol sales in South Africa during COVID. And that was just a good example of a situation in a local economy where you physically couldn't sell your product, and the only route to market was through exports in other countries. So hopefully this isn't something that will happen every day, but it was a good example of how exporting can elevate you out of your local situation. The benefit to a business to export is then obviously your scale. If you're exporting, the amount of people that buy your goods is much bigger. But at the same time, it's this de-risking of your business. But for a local economy or for economic growth, it's also important because a business in a town where there's a downturn, but they're selling to a market with spending power, that business can actually grow and employ more people. And the people in that business then have a high spending power and can spend money on the local economy. So there are benefits to the local economy if one business or two businesses and the more businesses in the local economy that are able to withstand any local downturns can have beneficial impact across a local economy. The amazing thing about technology is that you are increasingly able to sell your services. And so more and more professions, more and more people are able to, for instance, sit in Cape Town and provide a service to someone in London. This could be architects, software developers, administrators these days, even accountants, lawyers, financial services, animation. You seeing this benefit across more industries thanks to digitization and the acceleration thereof through COVID almost.
Okay, so those were some of the benefits to the economy when it comes to exports. What about tourism?
Tourism is actually comparable to exports. In fact, tourism is strictly speaking classified as a service export. But it's the same. Tourism is almost, you don't have to go through the effort of exporting your product. The foreign buyer comes to you. So this means that guys selling curios on the street or a small shop who can't, a small business who doesn't have the capacity to export also benefits from exporting because the foreign market comes to you essentially. Tourism has probably it's probably the industry that has the most potential to impact across so many sectors. I mean, across almost your entire economy, because tourists spend money on tourist attractions and game parks and stuff like that, but they also spend money on absolutely everything else in the economy, which you and I spend money on. So from the moment that a tourist arrives at the airport through to the transport, the hotel, the food that they buy. If the soap is locally made in the hotel, the soap, the people who serve the food, the grocery store that they go to, the lifeguard that's employed at the beach or at the pool that they go to. It just has an impact on so many different levels of the economy. So obviously also, your game parks or your big attractions, but it's not only limited to those. Tourism can fund big infrastructure projects. I mean, you can upgrading of airports, of roads, of transport systems. At the same time, tourism can contribute in a big way to something like conservation. And then the more conservation, the more tourists come and can have an impact in a really good way across many aspects of an economy. And I think we all just saw how absolutely devastating it was in the last 2 years when tourism just shut down. And the fact that it really isn't limited to a small industry. Tourism, every restaurant, every shop essentially, tourism really has an impact across so many aspects of the economy. Wesgro also does business tourism. So we also attract conferences, meetings, trade exhibitions to the Western Cape. And this is really another way where you can really lock in the benefits of visitors, let's say, into your local knowledge economy. So if you are bringing a global conference on something in the health industry, for instance, it immediately has an impact on your local health industry, on your local academics, on your local knowledge ecosystem, so to speak. And it shines a spotlight on what you have locally. And then obviously you create connections and networks. And so the business aspect of tourism is also an incredibly important part of tourism. And again, something that really got hit very, very hard through COVID and something that will have to be rebuilt systematically over time.
Thanks, Karan. What are the benefits of attracting foreign direct investment, and how are those benefits maximized for a local economy?
If we look at investment, the goal of attracting FDI is not necessarily to attract FDI. It is to reap the benefits of sustainable development that can come with FDI. There's a global competition for foreign direct investment, so you're always competing with other destinations. The reason there's competition is because FDI can be so beneficial. It's described often as a package of resources, so capital, technology transfer, knowledge, skills. If investment can have an impact across so many different parts of an economy. There are different types of investments. So it's often classified as market seeking or resource seeking or efficiency seeking, strategic asset seeking. So in the Cape, we often see your market seeking or efficiency seeking FDI. And that then becomes part of your value proposition to an extent. So we're seeing more and more companies that want to base themselves in the Western Cape and access the African market. So your market and something like the Continental Free Trade Agreement then becomes an interesting proposition because it will consolidate the market. So your value proposition then becomes better because you can say it's not just the South African market that you can access, it's the greater African market. The big thing really with FDI is how you link it into the local economy and the types of FDI. So if you have investment into enabling infrastructure or in enabling sectors, tech is an enabling sector, then investment into that sector can catalyze an entire industry and can allow local businesses to flourish as well, if data centers or cloud or broadband penetration. Then at the same time, you're bringing this depth of knowledge, maybe new knowledge, maybe different knowledge, which is then, through an agency like Wesgro, you want to link that investment into the local economy. So you want to create a pipeline of skills for that investment. So they're going to need skills, they're going to need land, they're going to need service providers, they're going to need the role of an agency like Wesgro is then to try and link as much of that into a local economy. So work with the universities to create the skills base or with the training institutes. Work with service suppliers, introduce them to service suppliers, ensure that as much of that investment is rooted back into your local economy and has a impact back into your skills development, maybe your complexity of your industries, of your sophistication of the level of the economy.
I can imagine it's not smooth sailing all the way. What are some of the challenges that need to be overcome to succeed in the work that you do? and for businesses to succeed?
There are quite a few of those. COVID has changed the fundamentals of doing business internationally. Things are slowly coming back to how they were, but business matchmaking, for instance, meeting buyers, bringing investors to see the province, all of these things changed when we couldn't travel. It's changed some things for maybe for the better. I've got a colleague who will speak about how our export team changed the way they work and maybe to a more efficient extent. You can never do away entirely with the need to travel, but you could do less of it. If you go down to each of those components that I've been speaking about, if we start with exports, you need to be competitive in an export market if you want to sell your goods or your services there. And in order to do that, there are a number of things which are important. The one is the enabling environment where your business is. Another one is the speed and efficiency with which your goods can get through the border and through customs. And then on the other hand, you've got a number of challenges in the export market itself, which you have to overcome. So the business environment, generally speaking, will determine it's the cost of doing business type of stuff. So it is your energy security, the price of electricity, the price of transport, the length of time it takes to set up a business or to get a bank account, or all those things that have to do with doing business. If you're exporting business, then there are additional things that you need to do. So you need specific permits. You need to prove to the country in which you are going to sell your goods that my good has been checked in my country and has been deemed safe or healthy, or it meets a certain standard. But that country has to recognize the certifying authority in my country. So there's a lot of negotiation that has to go on in terms of recognition of standards, recognition of safety standards, what they call sanitary and phytosanitary standards, which is your plant health and your food health and your food safety. And then you have all the documentation that you need, customs documentation, all the certificates, and the time it takes to get those can have a big impact on your competitiveness. If you have to go here to get one and there to get one, and there's a lag in that administrative process, that all plays a very big role in how competitively you can get your goods to the market. At the same time, whether your government is actually negotiating those standards and recognitions is also something that is quite fundamental to being able to sell your good in a market. So not in all markets, but in most of them, there's quite a process of agreement on standards, or on recognition rather. So those are all things that can have an impact that are dependent on your local context. Then obviously a good that's being exported needs to go through a port or through a land border or through air cargo. So those are all sort of potential bottlenecks in your competitiveness. The efficiency and effectiveness of the port can have an incredible impact on the competitiveness of your product, especially if it's a perishable product. And then of course, if you've got supply chain issues like we do at the moment, then getting the route to market is also complicated and not necessarily always certain. So those are all big challenges. We're looking at air cargo access from Cape Town, which was again something that was brought about by COVID, was the need for air cargo. So that's something that we're looking at expanding. In the market itself, there are all sorts of requirements. It can either be national requirements, regulatory requirements, or it can be requirements from the retailer, or it could be that consumers are looking for something specific. But essentially, this is stuff like your labeling requirements, your packaging requirements. Getting into the market obviously is your first challenge, and then finding buyers and finding distributors, understanding the market. So those are all things that impact export competitiveness. If you look at investment, you are looking much more at your local regulatory frameworks, your local investor certainty type of situation. So, I mean, obviously, firstly, there needs to be a market. There needs to be a reason why the investor wants to be in a specific place. But then let's say there are a number of places around the world that could offer that benefit, then they will look at stuff like rule of law. Will they be able to enforce contracts in that country? So rule of law brings certainty. So that's quite an important one in a country. And then your business enabling environment. How easily can I set up a business? How easily can I get my bank accounts? How, are there requirements on foreign ownership or not? Exchange controls. Can I get money in? Can I get money out? Then, interestingly, investors are going to look at market access that that country has. So I didn't mention this with exports, but it's worth mentioning. Another thing that gives you a competitive edge when you're exporting is trade agreements. We have, so for instance, South Africa has a trade agreement with Europe, with the UK, with SADC, and we have the United States has legislation called AGOA, which isn't, so it's not a trade agreement, but it has the same effect. And what that means is that you can export your goods duty-free into those markets. Now, that plays quite a big role in terms of competitiveness, depending on what the tariffs are or aren't. And so investors actually will also look at your access into other markets. So if an investor wants to set up an exporting, manufacturing and exporting business, then your destination is more valuable if you can give duty-free access into other markets, ease of access into other markets. Can the investor get his exports, into the other markets through the ports, through air transport? So then also with investment, a very big and increasingly important aspect is skills. There is and because the world is digitizing, there is a increasing competition internationally when it comes to skills. And so you want to be able to create that pipeline or to have that pipeline of skills to service the industry. But at the same time, there is a gap where you may need to hire foreign skills. So you can create the skills locally, but there are certain skills that you need to bring in either in the short term or because your industry is servicing another country and you need somebody who intricately understands the needs of that market. And so you'll see more globally facing economies will, they'll have a team of Germans working on the work that they do for Germany, a team of Brazilians working on the work that they do with Brazil. So your immigration system has a very big impact as well on your ability to attract investment, or often to retain that investment. Because even if it's just management from the holding company, investors generally need to bring a few skills with them. Those skills again create employment opportunities for locals, but it is something that comes up quite often, is the ability to hire foreign talent at the moment that it is needed. Some challenges around tourism. Yeah, it really has to do with awareness, firstly. People need to know that this is a destination that they want to visit and that they can visit. Once that's done, you need access. So ease of access. And this again has to do with ease of, do they need visas? Do they not need visas? How easily can they get a visa? Do they need to travel across the country to go to an embassy somewhere to get a visa? How long does it take? Flights, how long are the, we're a long haul destination, so direct flights are obviously easier. So ease of access, just awareness and really shining a light on the types of activities, the range of activities that you can do in a province.
Gordon, finally, why is it good to have a subnational agency rather than just a national agency?
The benefit of a subnational agency, I think, lies in its connectedness to the local ecosystem and the local economy. So a national investment agency will have scale, it will be more, maybe will be more effective in driving certain agendas in many things. But what really differentiates a local or a subnational agency is its connection to the ecosystem, to business, to government stakeholders at a local level, to your academic and research institutions. So you can plug in any investment into and really root it into the local economy. You can make sure that the linkages from tourism really go into the local economy. Because we are spanning such a, from investment through to tourism through to exports, it's a very broad span of and touches on almost every aspect of the economy. You just have so much more impact across many sectors. Because you work so closely with business, you understand the challenges on a day-to-day level that come with an investor trying to set up an investment or an exporter trying to get his goods across the border. And so you're able to play quite an important policy feedback or advocacy role as well, because you really understand the challenges and where small changes can have a big impact. So that convening and advocacy role is also something which is quite important, and which perhaps is the ability of a subnational agency.
A big thank you to Karen Bosman, Strategic Advisor, Office of the CEO at Wesgro, for such an insightful conversation around harnessing the benefits of foreign direct investment, exports, and tourism.